Hey, FOMO Sapiens. March is Women's History Month, and to celebrate all of the contributions of women in our society and in the business world, every episode this month features a fantastic female FOMO Sapiens. So listen into this month. We're going to have amazing new guests. They're going to tell you what they're doing, what they're building, and how they're doing it. And remember to thank the women in your life for all they have done for you and for society. FOMO. My name is Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out, and it's why some people end up following the crowd. But we're not like them. We're part of a new species that isn't afraid to do things differently. I call us FOMO Sapiens. And this is the show where you'll meet people like us, phenomenal FOMO Sapiens, to learn how they find the courage and the ideas to live exceptional lives. FOMO. FOMO. Welcome back to FOMO Sapiens, the show for people who don't just follow the crowd, but instead take their own path to success in business and in life. And we are back with another episode for our month of fantastic female FOMO Sapiens in honor of Women's History Month. Of course, I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis, venture capitalist by day, author and podcaster by night, and FOMO Sapiens 24/7. And our guest today is perfect for this month. When I read her book, I was just like, whoa, she is perfect for this show. Her name is Payal Kadakia, and Payal is the founder, and she was the executive chairman of ClassPass's, which is a monthly membership program that provides people of all fitness levels access to the best boutique fitness classes, gyms, and wellness experiences across the U.S. and abroad. And since the company was founded in 2013, ClassPass has facilitated almost 100 million reservations in more than 20 countries. Now, like she didn't have enough to do, Payal also is the founder and artistic director of the SA Dance Company, which she founded back in 2009 with the mission to increase awareness of Indian dance, bring it to the mainstream. That's pretty amazing. Now, Payal has appeared in all the major news outlets, places like Fast Company, where she was one of the 100 most creative people. She was named to Fortune's 40 Under 40 lists. And before she founded ClassPass, Payal worked at Bain & Company and at Warner Music Group. She has a degree in operations research from MIT. Impressive. Now, on this show, you're going to learn a couple of things. First of all, she's going to detail her rejection of a traditional path to success, one that was foisted upon her, in her own words, by her Indian parents. She's going to talk about the financial realities of leaving the treadmill to run your own company. And I like that a lot because, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, just do what you love. And she's much more practical, which I think is a real, it's a service to all of us. She's going to talk about the impact of the pandemic on the business. Remember, this was all in person. They had to completely pivot, which is a huge lift. And she talks about how Indian dance gave her her true calling and how it helped her to keep balance when things were getting a little crazy at the startup. Now, I do have one small ask today, which is please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Subscribe to the show. It helps me so much. It helps the show to make sure that we're there for you every week with great content, reach more people, and please share this episode with somebody who you think would enjoy it. And while you are subscribing, if you can give me 5 stars, assuming that you think I'm worth it, I'd appreciate that as well. All right. And now I feel like I just asked you for a lot of things, but I appreciate you considering it. And now on to the interview. As you know, I like to start with the same question every week. And I asked Payal my favorite question. What's a formative decision you've had to make to get to where you are today?
I had to quit my job, the corporate job, and go towards this unstructured, no salary place to really go for what I really wanted to in my life.
And when you did that, how long did it take you to decide?
So it was 6 years after college, right? And I think that's important to talk about because I spent 6 years sort of working in the professional world. I was a consultant. I then worked at Warner Music Group in the music industry, and I was trying to do what was the responsible thing according to everyone else in my life. But inside, I had a fire in me. I had a passion in me that really wanted me to go another way. And I finally, after 6 years, it was a matter of me making sure I had saved enough money, built enough experience. And I think another big part of it was that I had my parents' blessing. And I think that was a really important part for me because I grew up as, you know, the daughter of immigrants who had given up everything to be here. And I didn't want to just go jump off a cliff without having, you know, their foresight and blessing into it. And they were on board by the time I decided to make that leap, which was very important to me.
And we're going to talk about some of those aspects today, because I think it's really, it's sometimes we get the old kind of Instagram version of the story, which is like, I quit my job and then I'm,
Right.
started a successful company. But like having the financial sort of resources, having the support, like that stuff, you don't just do that in one day. So I appreciate you that you get into that, and we will discuss that in detail today. But I want to start first in your book, which just came out, called ClassPass's. You say that your mantra is, and this made me laugh because you're like, my mantra has been attributed to both Shakespeare and Picasso, which is like both good people, but I mean, somebody should figure that out. But the mantra is, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose is to give it away. So we're going to kind of get into that right now. I want to start with the first part. The meaning of life is to find your gift. How did you figure out what your gift was?
So we all have these innate talents, right? I think the whole world kind of gravitates towards something or another. I got lucky and found it at a really young age, and it was dancing. It was, Indian dance specifically. And for me, which we haven't gotten to the second part of the statement, but it really was this place where I knew I shined and I could give to others, which I thought was so important to it. But it really was dance for me.
I like how you kept yourself from jumping ahead, because that's
I know
really
I was about to go, but I decided.
I appreciate you. So yeah, and then the part about giving away. So I would say then you figured out which is dance, and then you decide that the giving away part is to start a business, ClassPass. Which, for those of you who haven't used ClassPass, I will tell you something. I know several people whose entire lives are dictated by ClassPass. Like they literally, it's like their schedule revolves around it. So first of all, tell us, I guess, how you came up with that idea, and explain ClassPass for those of people who maybe haven't used it before.
Yep. So ClassPass is a fitness and wellness membership program. It lets you book different experiences like spinning, massages, biking, and different places all around the world. We work with 30,000 different providers. We were actually just recently acquired by MindBody, but the product is out and about, and we've got a bunch of people using it around the world, and it's really changed their lives. And we've booked over 100 million reservations to date, which is what I am most proud of.
And so you come up with this idea, and what made you think, okay, me, I'm the one to do this? Like what? Because that is an audacious idea. Anytime an entrepreneur hatches an idea,
Fair.
I mean, yeah, you worked at Bain, you'd worked at Warner, you'd had real jobs, but that's one thing that's a little different than building a unicorn, which you did with ClassPass. So take us through those early days and how you kind of built up the confidence to actually go and do this.
Right. And I think this actually goes back to the second part of the question that we didn't fully get to, which was, when I was younger and I found dance, it wasn't just about me being good at something. I found that I could use it to make people feel something, right? So this whole idea of being in service of other people or impacting other people just sort of was something I felt at a very young age, and honestly triumphed many other things in my life, like needing money or needing to go shopping or traveling or other sort of, more tangible things that I think people want in their life, because I had this place that just made me feel so alive. So most of my, years when I was at Bain and even working at Warner, on the weekends, I was in dance rehearsal and performing, and I would invite my friends to shows, and they were always like, what are you doing this weekend? I'm going to the Hamptons, or I'm going to brunch. And I'm like, I have rehearsal. I'll see you guys on Monday. And that was just the way I lived. And I didn't question it because I enjoyed it and it was so fulfilling. And here I was, and I really consider myself as somebody who fought to dance through these years. I don't think it was easy. I obviously talk about it in a way that, yeah, I was doing it, but it was something I had to constantly fight to keep in my life. Where was I going to fit in classes? Where was I going to, fit in that performance? Did I have any meetings where I'd be traveling? It was always a big puzzle, but I was committed to it. And I realized that so many of my friends and people in my life who had these childhood dreams, being Olympians, being, great musicians of the world, had sort of just given up on these things and started living this corporate ladder, trying to, get a promotion, get married, all these, sort of things that society stipulates for you without thinking about what their heart and passion is. So there was always that going on in my life, which I think is important to preface before I get to the actual problem I wanted to solve, because that's sort of what supported my foundation, is the fact that I had actually been fighting this for me my whole life. And starting ClassPass was me taking this fight on for everybody else in their life. And I already was so attuned to the problem that, of course, it manifested as a tech problem, because I was sitting there on a Tuesday looking for a ballet class and I couldn't find the right class and time and teacher. And so that turned into a real tangible problem I could fix with technology, right? And that's when I started thinking, okay, let me go build an open table for classes. And that sort of seemed to be the product idea that came to me first. But all of it really started with this mission of wanting to solve a problem to make people feel what I always had in dance in their life.
FOMO. Now, you write in the book about the fact that it was hard to balance. In fact, Bain, you sort of got the feedback from your boss. It's like, listen, and it's like, I just want to call that person and be like, you gave a bad advice, or that's not fair, but we're not going to do that. But sort of like, you have to choose. And I think that's the system. The system says, well, the treadmill only, the treadmill is narrow, right? You can't have a wide treadmill for all the things. And so, you had faced that. Now, I imagine when you started ClassPass, a lot of people told you no, because, oh, well, you can't do that. Why would a salon, or why would a gym want to allow people to join and just come in at a discounted rate? I imagine there's a lot of no there. How do you push past no? Because it sounds like you're pretty good at it. So share the secrets.
Yeah, I think a few strategies, I would say. One of the ways to push past no is to find other people who are going to say yes and have the hope that someone else is going to say yes. And I think I just never, ever let myself feel that there wasn't another person I could go to. And I think that's what you really just have to have, that faith and that hope, that dream that keeps you going. And I think that's the sort of fire and spark that keeps founders going. On the other side of it, I think part of what was challenging for me, and actually I didn't really see it at the time, but I was a female entrepreneur who was building a very female-centric company, pitching to very male-centric firms, and I didn't let it get to me at the time. I just was, obviously, like I said, I was focused on getting the capital, moving forward. But I did remember a lot of times people to say, why don't you build this for personal training or something that they felt comfortable in? And eventually, and this took me 3 years, really, until I had a product and the boutique fitness industry was growing and I had hockey stick growth. Like literally, it was one of those things where people just couldn't ignore me and the product, because the growth of the product, the virality of it was something that everyone was completely astonished by, right? And it was one of those dreams that every VC is looking at to be like, oh yeah, you want the hockey stick. And I finally had it. And it was actually after 3 years of going to Silicon Valley that I had it. And I saw everything flip. Like I saw the way all the relationships changed overnight. And it was pretty interesting to see that and witness that, from going from somebody who literally like no one wanted to talk to obviously having the product and the data that finally supported the vision. While I obviously always say I wish they supported me earlier, because I always had the vision, I get that sometimes it takes a bit more time and, like I said, data to really be able to prove it, but I was never going to give up. And, an investor once said this to me, is that, investors invest in lines, not dots. So you really want to make sure that line is constantly going up, right, with the progress that you're making.
Yeah, what you're saying here reminds me of a past guest we've had on the show, who I'm sure you know, Kate Ryder of Maven Clinics.
Yeah.
And when she started that business, she found, it's women-centric healthcare. So she'd be pitching a room full of guys who were like, wait a minute, you're telling us that it's a huge market? It's bigger. It's more than 50%. And she's like, yeah, that's, here are the numbers. But it's sort of like, as we all know, people have their sort of implicit biases. And sometimes, like, until you can give them the data, whether that's market data that, or just the data of your business performing, they're not going to do the work.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I think when you are from like underrepresented communities, that's just sort of what you need to do. And, it makes me, even with anything I've accomplished in my life, as much as I'm proud of it. What I always know is that, wow, my story, I know, is a data point for someone else to be able to give, hopefully another female, maybe even a woman of color, a check, and that does make me proud.
Now, you write about the expectations of others a lot in the book. And I think that this is another thing that you see in like an immigrant family where there's like a desire for safety. And a lot of founders do come from immigrant families, and they have to kind of change mom and dad's mind, who are like, why don't you go to, stay at the investment bank? And it's a hard pivot, right? And I think many of us feel that. And I still think, sometimes I'm like, oh, if I just was a hedge fund manager, like my dad would be slightly happier. Sorry, Dad, but I think that. So talk about that, how you manage that, because I think that's something that so many of us struggle with.
Yeah. My parents, by the way, I will say, have been my number one champions. I talk about this in my book. I was set up in a way where I believe I had a team when I was like 5 years old. And whether that was getting Payal to be able to perform at a party and having a team of my mom, my dad, and my dance teacher helping me, I realized at a very young age that people can help you to create good things in the world. And my parents were always a part of my team. That being said, they had their own experiences. They had to make sure, I was safe, protected, all of that. And so I think when, they were projecting that onto me, I think one of the biggest things I did was to help build their confidence in my skills, right? So that meant oversharing my journey. I think a lot of times we have the tendency to hide the things that we think that people are going to yell at us for, right? Or say no to. And I did the exact opposite. I think I overshared to the point where it was probably, too much. And my mom and dad have, they're different. I think in every relationship, you always know your mom and dad are going to give you a little bit of different advice. But I would like overshare with my mom in certain ways and then overshare with my dad in certain ways. My dad obviously was the one who wanted me to go to business school, and school was just the most important thing to him. And, I think over time, and I talk about this one experience in the book where I had a big dance show and it went really well. And the day after my dad was kind of hounding me about the GMATs, he's like, I started looking up arts programs at Columbia, which was so sweet. Like, I think for someone to realize what a compromise that was for my dad, and like to get his brain to shift a little bit, to be like, oh my God, my daughter is creative and like she really likes being here and an artist, but okay, she still needs to go get another degree. It was just a very sweet moment for him to come to that. But I think all of these moments, what I realized is oversharing is what gets them on board, because at the end of the day, it's fear for them, right? It is nothing else. So the best way for them to overcome that is information, right? It's not putting them in a place where they don't know what's going on, because that's just going to create more and more anxiety for them.
Yeah. My new catchphrase for 2022 is fear-based decision-making leads to suboptimal outcomes and incomes.
It's very true.
And I just came up with that and I'm using it. So everybody get ready. But it is like, if you think about it, if you had made decisions based out of fear, you wouldn't be where you are today. If you just kind of were afraid to tell your parents and to show them who you were and your very, sort of wide set of talents, they wouldn't have understood and had the confidence in you. So it's when you put the facts in and you replace the fear, people can make better decisions.
Absolutely. And I think a big other part of expectations I have learned, and I really recommend this to everyone, is when certain expectations are not serving you, you have to shut them off. And whether that means saying like goodbye to people, not having certain people in your life, turning off social media, you are in control of your mind. And I think people forget that. And we feed our brains with so much of the wrong information that takes us away from the path that is actually the best for us and our ability to really chart our own journeys in our life.
You just teed me up, because talking about expectations, you are a very prominent figure. You were the first South Asian founder of a unicorn. And at one point, you had to make the decision to transition from being the CEO of the company to being the chair of the board and taking on a different role, which I got to think, people are always giving you lots of affirmation and how great you are. But inside, you're like, is this the place I'm supposed to be? So talk about that decision.
So, I think a lot of times, especially it was hard because titles seem to be what everyone always craves in their life. I never started a company to be a CEO. I never started a company, to reach a unicorn valuation. I started a company to make an impact in the world and enjoy the work I do. And I think when, your companies grow, and this happens in so many startups, right? Like, CEO role just sort of takes on a whole other flavor. And especially being a female founder during this time, it came with like even more pressure because everyone was like, I want you to do this and I want you to do that. And it was a lot of stuff that I felt was taking me away from what I really enjoyed and did no longer felt authentic to how I wanted to be spending my time. And honestly, I had been here before in my life when I quit my job, right? And decided to start my company. And I realized that this is on me to keep changing. I had never listened to what society's expectations were. And of course, if I followed society's expectations in that point, I would have obviously been like, oh yeah, I'm going to keep the title and do all that because I felt boxed into it. And every single time I feel boxed in, my reaction and I know my true self is to like shatter it to get to the other side. And I needed to do that. And I knew the only way I could do that was to get rid of that title. And obviously, you can only do that if you have the right team, with you. And I feel really lucky that throughout my journey at ClassPass, I've been able to find great people who believed in me and at the same time have been able to operate and execute the vision that we've always had from the very beginning. And I think that is something that requires a lot of self-awareness. I think it's very hard to do that. Yeah, of course I was scared. I knew people were going to, say, oh my God, did something happen? And almost question it. But I had to remember this was a decision that I know was right for me. And that means it is the right thing to do. And I think in any career decision, you can't make decisions based on what everyone else is going to think. You have to do what's right for you.
FOMO. Now, in January 2020, you're riding high. ClassPass raises a huge round, $1 billion valuation. Companies like blowing up. And then, boom, COVID. Now, that had to feel awful because from what I read is I did a little research, basically like, bookings fell by 95%. You had to pivot to online. Just a whole, the absolute nightmare for a business like yours. So the business is, it's survived. You guys, were able to work it through. But I just would love to hear I think that you were dealing with such uncertainty. And you had to, I just have to imagine just from a mental perspective, you're like, oh my goodness, my entire sort of life's work is now imperiled. Like, how did you manage through that situation?
By the way, I will also add, I had a baby January 29th of that same.
Oh my goodness. You were like, this January is the best January ever.
The 6 weeks after, when I had a six-week-old baby, and all of this happened at the same time. So I'm just adding that because sometimes, and I think it's important to realize the mental state of everyone, at that time. And it was just a really tough period. But here's what I will say is the DNA of ClassPass has always been one that has been built on this resilience and pivoting. I mean, I think anyone who has known the company has known we have changed, we have iterated, we have pivoted, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's been bad, right? But we've never been okay with staying stagnant just because people think we should. And so, going into video as quickly as we could, and honestly shifting our focus to saving our partners was such an important part of this. And I think we knew, because we had just raised capital, that we would be okay for a long enough period, but we needed to make sure the industry survived, right? And especially even at the end of it, when we ended up being acquired by MindBody, all of it was because we knew we had built something that was going to stay. The ethos behind ClassPass is one that will last forever. We know that. This was obviously a shift in a time period. And obviously some behaviors are going to change on the other side of this, but do we still believe people are going to be looking for fitness and wellness experiences? Absolutely. So for us, it really became how do we get through this in the best way possible and hold hands with our partners, right, and the rest of the industry to make sure we're all on the other side of this in a way that we're all stronger and not weaker. And that's really what our focus went to. But look, uncertainty was terrible. I mean, I always remember a conversation would be like, okay, well, we'll put the plan on for like relaunch in September. And then it was like, okay, March. And then, okay, like September again. And it kept getting pushed, and I think it was really hard for the team. I think that was probably one of the hardest things to not be able to go, because the people and our team at ClassPass they're just such hard workers, and we love that energy. And we were in a waiting game. So it was just a really tough time to kind of go through this, because we were waiting more than sort of innovating and creating at the time.
Yeah. And it is lucky. I mean, your point about you just closed around, so you had the runway. In fact, Mercado Libre, which is a NASDAQ 100 company now and is worth $1 gazillion. The only reason that company survived in 2001 is because they'd raised around right before. And so I was an investor in that company. I remember just like we saw a lot of other great companies that shifted, but they had, it's a great company, of course, but they're also the timing they had.
Right.
Was amazing. And
right. And look, no one could have suspected this, right, in any way. And that is, we did have that moment and we got lucky. And, and even like I said, I think MindBody and ClassPass together is another moment where, the companies together are going to be able to make more impact on the industry and continue to move the ethos forward.
Now, the book is called LifePass, and you're giving a kind of a playbook for people who are looking to unlock their potential. And you have a couple of things that I just want to bring up because folks are going to go check it out. But there's a couple of things that I love that you focused on because it was like, some of these books love the intent behind them, but they're like written as if like from the top of the mountain. It's sort of like they're not realistic. And you talk about finances, and I was like, oh, thank you for doing that. So talk about kind of that stuff.
Yeah. And I love that you just said that. My husband always sees people, DMing me being like, I'm going to quit my job because of you. Like, thank you. And he's like, I hope you tell them like what you did before, and so I really remember, and I was like, I have to talk about this. And I never get a chance to, right? No one ever wants to talk about this when I'm being interviewed. Everyone's like, tell me about how you made the decision. But I
do
put a plan together, and so I'm glad you're asking this because I talk about this. Like I sat down with my dad. We came up with a budget. We came up with, I had 6 years of savings, right, to actually be able to put towards my dream. And of course, by the way, I really want to say this to people. I don't expect other people to be there. But what I really want people to realize is you have to make your money work for you and your dream. So that means if you do have a dream, it doesn't mean, I can never do it because I'm never going to have enough money. It means start coming up with a plan today to save, right? To earn some extra income if you need to. So you can start putting stuff together and a plan in place so you don't feel trapped. I think money is one of the most trapping of the constraints I talk about in the book. And I see so many people not living their best life, right? Because of this prison they're in with money. And I really want people to see money in a different way. And by the way, I say this because I grew up with close to no money, and so I've seen it from all sides. And I really believe that you need to find a way to be, thoughtful about every dollar, put a strategy in place, and then execute on it. And once you really know what money is also worth to you, I think that's the other big thing of it is one of the things, and, I used to never travel. As I was talking before, I didn't really shop. Like those things didn't have value to me. This was, once again, my personal choice, right? I think everyone needs to know what theirs is. But I had a dance show and I had to put a $30,000 check down and I was like, great, let me do it. And I didn't question that because the dance show meant so much to me. And I think that's what people really need to do is what do you want to spend money on that's actually going to add value to your life? And that's how I made the decisions and choices with my money. And I really encourage other people to do that so they can unleash themselves from, this constraint that we sometimes have.
All right. The book is LifePass. Drop your limits, rise to your potential. You can find more about Payal at her Instagram, which is really nice, by the way. It's at Payal, Payal. You can also check out the website for the book. It's lifepassbook.com. And I encourage you to go to YouTube where you can find Payal's Sangeet dance, which I checked out as somebody who's taken Indian dance lessons and danced with a former guest of the show, Anu Dougal, at a wedding. I had mad respect for your dance skills. It was very impressive.
Thank you very much. I love it. And I love my culture and just want to share it with the world. So thank you for encouraging people to watch it.
All right. Payal Kadakia, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOSapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com. FOMO.